Welcome to the Tier 2 Reading Screeners Training. As part of Ohio's new law requiring screening to identify students who may be at risk of reading difficulties, this training is designed to provide teachers with the understanding of what Tier 2 screeners are, why they are needed, which students will need to be screened and when, and how to administer the screenings. If this is only your second session of the day, don't worry. You'll learn about Tier 1 screeners later this afternoon. But we will cover how Tier 1 and Tier 2 screeners are related. With this being the first year that CCS is implementing the new screening requirements, there are bound to be some changes to the process as we find out what works in practice, not just what looks like a good plan on paper. Please keep this in mind as we go through this training. There will be additional guidance that comes out based on questions and feedback received. To submit a question or concern, use the Google form linked here. This information will also be shown at the end of this session. At the completion of this session, you should be able to understand the components of the Tier 2 screeners, why they are needed, which students will need to be screened and when, and how to administer the screenings. Let's look at the purpose of Tier 2 screeners. Intervention-based diagnostic assessments, or Tier 2 dyslexia screening, addresses the second step in the problem-solving model, problem analysis, by answering the questions of why the problem is happening and what type of support is needed. They also address the third step, plan development and implementation, by helping to answer the question of what is the next step for instruction. This is done through analyzing the skills a student has already mastered and those they have not. The characteristics of these Tier 2 screeners required by law are that they are standardized or informal rather than teacher-created, specific and detailed, and that they are directly linked to the district's structured literacy intervention program. Along with the universal screening, or Tier 1, the additional screening results provide guidance on both the specific skills a student needs help with and adjustments to the intervention program. This table describes key characteristics of intervention-based diagnostic assessments and how they differ from universal screening. Because universal or Tier 1 screeners are brief indicators, they often do not provide sufficient detail about a student's skills to facilitate instructional planning. Intervention-based diagnostic assessments, or Tier 2 screeners, are administered to students identified as at risk on the Tier 1 measure in order to better understand the specific skills a student needs instructional support to develop. They identify where each student is on an instructional continuum and specify next steps for instruction. The purpose of intervention-based diagnostic assessments is to drive instruction and accelerate student progress by identifying the next steps for instruction or the appropriate lesson within a structured literacy program. The administration of intervention-based diagnostic assessments will occur after 6 weeks of evidence-based interventions. Progress monitoring data from those interventions must be collected at least on the 2nd, 4th, and 6th week after the student is identified at risk, and will help to guide which of the Tier 2 screeners are needed for individual students. Tier 2 screeners also provide information for reading improvement and monitoring plans. In Ohio's dyslexia support laws, intervention-based diagnostic assessment refers to the practice of identifying where a student is on an instructional continuum and specifying the next steps for instruction. Ohio's third grade reading guarantee requires schools to provide students identified as not on track with a RIMP. The intervention-based diagnostic assessments can be used to support the identification of the student's reading needs, inform the instructional services and support that will be provided to the student, provide scientifically based and reliable assessment, and initial and ongoing analysis of the student's reading progress as required by the RIMP. Let's look at each of the 3 Tier 2 screeners that CCS has elected to use to help identify what type of skill development is needed, as well as the next step for skills-based reading intervention. The first Tier 2 screener we will address is the Phonological Awareness Screening Tool, or PAST. After a student has received 6 weeks of evidence-based interventions in the area of phonological awareness, they should be given the Phonological Awareness Screening Tool, or PAST. Along with progress monitoring data, this tool will help to determine if the student is making sufficient progress with the intervention. Additional guides to support your use of the PAST are located in the Resources section of your online LETRS course. To administer the PAST, follow the sample line at the beginning of each level. Administer each item at a given level the same way. Note that you are always deleting or substituting the sound represented by the letter or letters in the parentheses. For example, On the first item in level D1, bookcase with the word book in parentheses means book gets deleted. It is very important to properly pronounce the sounds and the cues. Sounds are depicted with slash marks called virgules. When giving directions for letters F through M, use letter sounds, not letter names. For example, when you say change a to I, you say the sound made by the letter, not the name of the letter. The exception is with the long vowel sounds in level J2. Long vowel sounds are represented by uppercase letters in virgules. These long vowel sounds match the letter name. So for the first item in level J2, you would say beak. Now, say beak, but instead of E, say A. All items are timed. When you administer an item, as soon as you finish speaking, immediately count in your head 1001, 1002. Use a stopwatch or sweep second hand at first to be sure you're counting 2 seconds. If the student responds correctly before you get to the word to in that phrase, they receive credit for responding automatically. Put a check plus in the blank next to the word to indicate an automatic response. However, if the student answers correctly but after that 2-second count, mark a check next to the item. If the student has not answered, continue counting until you reach 1005. If the student gives no response after 5 seconds, repeat the item to give the student a second chance. After repeating the item, resume the mental counting. If the student responds correctly within 5 seconds of the second chance, score the item as correct with a check. An automatic or check plus score can only occur within the first 2 seconds of the first try. The second chance is given because students sometimes forget what you asked. Also, if the student asks you to repeat the item, do so. However, repeated items cannot be scored as automatic, only as correct with a check or incorrect with a 0. A unique feature of the past is that the examiner provides corrective feedback for every incorrect item. Feedback on the past is based on the assumption that a student is not going to develop phonological awareness skills in the 6 to 8 minutes it takes to administer this test. Give feedback for every incorrect response. The standard correction is, the answer is tall. When you say ball and change the b to t, you get tall. Ball, tall. See how that works? No further demonstration or explanation is permitted, especially no visual cues. Also, you must never refer to the location of the sound in the word. Correct every incorrect item, even if it is the last one at a level. It's also okay to acknowledge that the student got an item correct, especially if he or she responds tentatively but correctly. Lastly, if the combined correct score on 2 levels in a row is 0 or 1 out of 10, discontinue the test. Score all items above those levels as incorrect. Now, watch this administration of a few items on the past. Refer to the video demo protocol in your Tier 2 materials. The sample starts at level G, toward the bottom of the first page of the past protocol. After, we will discuss how the student performed and how to score it. Say more.
More.
Now say more, but instead of say d.
Door.
All right. Say gum.
Gum.
Now say gum, but instead of g, say th.
Thumb.
All right. Say lead.
Lead.
Now say lead, but instead of say s.
Sled.
Almost. If you say lead, but instead of you say s, you get said. All right. Say full.
Full.
Now say full, but instead of f, say w.
Ooh.
Close. If you say full, but instead of f, you say w, you get wool. All right, you're doing a great job. Say sleep.
Sleep.
Now say sleep, but don't say s.
Sleep.
If you say sleep without the s, you get leap.
Leap.
Sleep, leap. You see how that works? All right, try this one. Say crane.
Crane.
Now, say crane, but don't say k.
Rain.
Rain, good job. Say bright.
Bright.
Now say bright, but change the b to f.
Fright.
All right. Say plowed.
Cloud.
Now say plowed, but change the p to k.
Cloud.
All right. Say flows.
Flows.
Now say flows, but change the f to k.
Close.
Nice job. Say went.
Went.
Now say went, but don't say. Once you have discontinued the test, add up the number of correct and automatic answers for each level. A level is considered passed if at least 4 out of the 5 items are correct. A level is considered automatic if at least 4 out of the 5 items are answered automatically or with a check plus. Levels with 3 out of 5 or fewer are not considered passed. The syllable levels are split between 6 and 4 items instead of 5. For these, the levels are passed and automatic if at least 5 out of 6 and 3 out of 4 items are answered automatically, respectively. Keep in mind that you continue to administer levels until a student gets a 0 or 1 on 2 consecutive levels combined. Just because a student does not pass a level does not necessarily mean that you discontinue. Then, add up the totals for each area: basic syllable, onset rhyme, basic phoneme, and advanced phoneme. These line items are in bold on the past form. You will transfer each of these area totals to the top of the past form. Let's look at the scoring and interpretation of this demonstration student's performance on the past. Refer to the completed sample protocol in your packet of training materials. As you can see, the student passed level H, but did not pass any levels automatically. This may be due to nervousness of being recorded, since he did demonstrate the skills automatically on several items within each of the levels in D through H. Please take 8 minutes to practice administering the pass with a colleague. Be sure to give the directions for each section and speak clearly. When you are role-playing the student, make some errors so your partner can practice providing the appropriate feedback. Each of you will have a chance to play each role. Be sure to complete the score summary during the practice time. You'll switch roles after 4 minutes. Please begin your practice now. Please switch roles if you haven't already done so. Thank you for taking the time to practice. You will have additional opportunities to practice before you are required to begin screening students. The second Tier 2 screener we will address is the Letters, Phonics, and Word Reading Survey. After a student has received 6 weeks of evidence-based interventions in the area of phonics and spelling, they should be given the Phonics and Word Reading Survey from the Letters materials. This tool, along with progress monitoring data, will help to determine if the student is making sufficient progress with the intervention. Additional guides to support your use of the Phonics and Word Reading Survey are located in the Resources section of your online Letters course. The survey is untimed, but should take about 5 to 10 minutes to administer. Do not belabor administration of elements the student clearly does not know. If you are unsure whether the student knows letter names and sounds, start with those items. Otherwise, begin with the single-syllable words and nonsense syllables in each section where you think the student will be 100% correct. You want them to experience some success before moving on to more challenging patterns. If they know at least some of the one-syllable patterns, ask the student to try the 2- and 3-syllable words. It is also advisable to see if the student knows the high-frequency words. Discontinue if the student is having no success. If the student makes a mistake but immediately self-corrects, count the item as correct. If the student makes an error, keep going without giving corrective feedback. Note that this is different from the past. Do not give corrective feedback or try to teach the student how to read the words. It is okay to give neutral encouragement like, "Nice job," or "You did just what I asked." Write down the student's response so that types of decoding errors can be analyzed later. Encourage the student to move on if he or she cannot respond to an item within about 3 seconds. Discontinue the survey when the word lists become too difficult for the student to read. As you see, this survey is less structured than the past. As the student reads the words from their student form, mark the scoring record accordingly. There is not a standardized method noted to do this. Many people find it helpful to do nothing if the student reads the word correctly, and to write how a child says the word if they read it incorrectly. Making these notes is helpful when determining what types of errors the student makes, which will help define target skills for intervention. Then, simply count the words read correctly for each row. The extension activities may be helpful in determining if a child has basic encoding skills, but they are not a required component of the survey. The summary chart allows you to see a student's performance at a glance and will help to select skills to target for interventions. If the student does not yet know all of their letter names and sounds, the ones that they missed are recorded in the Targets for Instruction section. Also, record the totals in the Pre column on the right. For the decoding skills, tally up how many the student answered correctly in each area and transfer these numbers to the summary chart. Then total the number answered correctly for each skill across the real words, nonsense words, and combined lists. The student should be able to correctly decode with 90% accuracy on this survey in order to consider the skill mastered. Now, watch this administration of a few items on the Letters, Phonics, and Word Reading survey. The sample starts with closed syllable words toward the top of the second page of the video demo protocol. After, we will discuss how the student performed and how to score it. All right, we're going to try some different kinds of words. All right, now we're going to start up here. And remember, point to it as you read it.
Rot. Wad. Bun. Lap. Clit. Some.
Good, go on to the next row.
Lom. Limbs. Dids. Gom. Jad. John.
Great, and that next row.
Rapid.
Okay. Next one.
Feed.
Okay. Let's look at the scoring and interpretation of this student's performance on the Letters, Phonics, and Word Reading survey. Refer to the completed sample protocol in your packet of training materials. As you can see, Words that the student read correctly are not marked at all. Words or graphemes that the student read incorrectly are crossed off, with the phonetic representation of the student's errors marked. Totals from each of the skills are then transferred to the summary chart for easy reference. Now, please take 8 minutes to practice administering the Letters, Phonics, and Word Reading Survey with a colleague. When you are role-playing the student, make some errors so your partner can practice marking the protocol accurately. Each of you will have a chance to play each role. Be sure to complete the score summary during the practice time. You'll switch roles after 4 minutes. Please begin your practice now. Please switch roles if you haven't done so already. Thank you for taking the time to practice. You will have additional opportunities to practice before you are required to begin screening students. The final Tier 2 screener we will address is the listening subtest of the narrative language measure. After a student has received 6 weeks of evidence-based interventions in the areas of vocabulary, oral language, and/or listening comprehension, they should be given the listening subtest of the narrative language measure. This tool will help to determine if the student is making sufficient progress with the intervention. All materials, including additional training videos, can be found at languagedynamicsgroup.com/cubed-links. Select the story appropriate for the child's grade level. Read the directions exactly from the script provided. Notice that each benchmark has a warm-up story where you teach the child how they are expected to respond. The first story is not scored. Once the child understands the expectations, you will read a second story. The child's retell and ability to answer questions about the second story is what will be used to determine their skills. Due to the number of items that you need to listen for as the student retells the story and responds to questions, it is highly recommended that you audio record the student. It may be helpful to also record yourself saying the student's name at the beginning of the recording. For example, you can put their name into the directions by saying, "Thanks for listening, Charlie. Now you tell me that exact same story. Try to include as many details as you can." As the student retells the story you just read to them, note whether the student mentions various components of the story, including the character, setting, problem, feeling, plan, attempt to resolve the problem, consequences, ending, and the end feeling. For older grades, there are 2 attempts to resolve the problem. Also, listen for whether the student uses the complex or more detailed phrases included in the discourse complexity area. After the student attempts to retell the story and you provide scores for the relevant sections, you will then ask the questions. Free retell is a more difficult task, so by including specific questions, you can determine if the child does remember and does understand those components of the story. The inferential vocabulary section provides an opportunity to see if the student is able to understand the meaning of unknown words given context clues. If they are not able to give you a definition, you then provide a multiple-choice question. Then, the inferential reasoning questions give insight into whether the student is able to think beyond the text. Those are the sections that you score when you have the student with you. At a later time, listen to the audio recording of the student's retell. The sections of the scoring protocol seen here provide a measure of the complexity of a student's vocabulary and oral expression skills. Listen for the words or phrases in these blocks and score accordingly. In the sentence complexity section, you give 1 point each time a student uses one of the words or phrases. For example, the student would get a point each time they said either because or so that, and a point each time they said either when or while, etc. The student's results are interpreted through a criterion reference lens, meaning that raw scores are used to represent a student's performance. For example, how many points they earned in the retell. And make a determination about whether the student's scores meet expectations according to a predefined criterion based on their grade level placement. With the cubed, students can be categorized as at benchmark if they meet criteria, at moderate risk if their performance is moderately lower than expected, and at high risk if their performance is very low. Risk status refers to the extent to which a student is at risk for experiencing difficulty in the specific domain being tested, in this case, listening comprehension. To get the NLM scores, look at the raw scores from the retell and question sections. Then, refer to the table in this slide to determine the student's level of risk. This information can also be found on page 146 of the manual available online. Watch this administration of the NLM listening subtest as you follow along on the scored protocol in your materials. After, we will discuss how the student performed and how to score it.
Thank you for reading and listening. Now you tell me that exact same story and try to include as many details as you can in the story. Okay? Go. Just tell me the parts you remember.
Okay. that he got wet. His shoes were soaked, and then he got new boots. And then he wouldn't get wet anymore. And that's
Okay. Okie dokie. All right. Who was the story about?
Owen.
Where was Owen in the beginning of the story?
Outside in the rain.
And what two things did you learn about galoshes from the story? Do you remember?
No.
Okay. Owen was completely drenched. He had been playing in the rain. What does drenched mean?
What?
Great. Owen's mom struggled to get his boots on. They were old. What does struggle mean?
Old?
Do you think struggle means to wish or to try hard?
Try hard?
Okay. Owen frolicked in the puddles again. He had his boots on. What does frolic mean?
I don't know.
Does frolic mean to play or to swim?
Play.
Okay. Using clues from this story, how long do you think Owen's mom planned to stay outside?
I don't know.
That's okay. Using clues from the story, how well do you think the old galoshes fit Owen? What do you think? It's okay. We can go to another question.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Why do you think Owen wanted to play in the rain?
To get wet?
Yeah. Why do you think that?
Let's look at the scoring and interpretation of this student's performance on the NLM listening. Refer to the completed sample protocol in your packet of training materials. You can see that the student was able to provide information about the problem and consequence and a bit about the ending. She did not use any of the complex phrases specifically stated. However, when questions were asked, she was able to provide more detailed information, and she was able to demonstrate understanding of inferential vocabulary. She had more difficulty responding to open-ended inferential questions, which provides information about how she might be supported during instruction. Please take 8 minutes to practice administering the listening subtest with a colleague. When you are role-playing the student, make some omissions in your retell so your partner can practice providing the appropriate feedback and scoring. Each of you will have a chance to play each role. You'll switch roles after 4 minutes. Please begin your practice now. Please switch roles if you haven't done so already. Thank you for taking the time to practice. You will have additional opportunities to practice before you are required to begin screening students. So in closing, in this session, you learned what Tier 2 screeners are, why they are needed as part of Ohio's new dyslexia laws, which students will need to be screened and when, and how to administer the screenings. These screeners will be used, along with intervention data, to determine whether a student who was initially identified as being at risk for difficulty acquiring reading skills is making progress with their reading skills. Here again is the QR code that you can use to submit any questions that you have regarding the Tier 2 screeners. Please know that once all of the screening trainings have been completed, we will gather all questions and provide frequently asked questions document and additional guidance as it becomes available. Thank you very much for your attention today.